The girl in her 20s lay in the hospital bed, her small frame almost swallowed by the loose patient gown. The bed was raised so she was half reclining, half sitting, which made her position uncomfortable and strained. Her eyes were fixed on the clock on the wall, its steady ticking the only sound breaking the heavy silence of the room. Occasionally, a distant murmur from the corridor outside drifted in, but it felt miles away and irrelevant to her. Her face was a mask of complete desolation. Her eyes, swollen and red, told a story of endless suffering and grief. The tears had long since dried, leaving behind only a vacant, hollow look. Her once bright eyes now stared blankly, the life within them seemingly extinguished. The room felt cold and impersonal, its harsh white walls and sterile environment amplifying her sense of isolation. The ticking of the clock seemed almost cruel, each tick a reminder of time slipping away without relief. The girl sat motionless, trapped in a state of numbness, her thoughts and emotions frozen in the face of her unending pain. The silence was profound, punctuated only by the relentless march of the seconds, each one dragging her deeper into her solitude. The door opened with a creak, and a man in his 50s stepped into the room. His face, lined with worry and fatigue, softened as he took in the sight of his daughter lying in the bed. After closing the door behind him with a soft click, he moved further inside, his footsteps almost silent on the sterile floor. "Man, princess?" Her gaze remained fixed on the clock, her eyes vacant and distant, as if the steady ticking was the only thing anchoring her to the present. The door opened again, this time admitting a woman of similar age, carrying a few items. She moved with practiced grace, but her eyes betrayed her concern. "Woman, very nice, Subin, leaving all the stuff with." The man raised his hand, a signal for her to stop. "Man, wait, Yumi." Yumi paused, her gaze shifting from the man to the girl on the bed. "Woman. Now you both, a father and daughter, start." "Subin, princess? Look at dad." "Yumi, YN?" YN's lips trembled as she struggled to articulate her thoughts. "YN, you failed." The words hung in the air, their weight palpable. Both parents exchanged looks of confusion and concern. "Subin, what do you mean?" They approached the bed. Yumi carefully sat on the edge of the mattress, facing YN, while Subin pulled up a chair and positioned himself on the other side, close to the bed. The room seemed to close in around them, the silence almost suffocating. YN's voice was laced with bitter sorrow as she spoke, her gaze unwavering. "YN, you failed to find your princess her dream prince." Tears welled up in her eyes, each one a drop of her profound despair. Her cheeks were streaked with the remnants of earlier tears, and her voice broke as she continued. "Yumi, honey. I know it's hard, losing a child is the worst pain a woman can go through, but YN, he doesn't trust me." The shock on Subin and Yumi's faces was evident. Their eyes met in a silent exchange of horror and confusion. "Subin, Taehyung?" YN nodded, the tears slipping down her cheek now joined by others. Her eyes, once vibrant and full of hope, now reflected only anguish. She finally pulled her gaze away from the clock and met her father's eyes. The depth of her pain was almost tangible. Subin, a father who had always treasured his daughter above all else, felt his heart shatter at the sight of her suffering. The man who had adored her like a precious jewel, who had never wanted to see her in tears, was now faced with the unbearable reality of her heartbreak. The sight of her tear-filled eyes, once bright with joy, now dimmed by sorrow, was a blow to his very soul. "YN, Dad." Taking a deep, shuddering breath, Subin spoke, his voice a broken whisper. "Subin, yes. Dad's life." Tears continued to stream down YN's face, each one a painful testament to her shattered dreams and unfulfilled hopes. The room was heavy with the unspoken pain of a family caught in the throes of profound loss, the ticking of the clock a relentless reminder of time slipping away, and the silence a crushing weight on their hearts. "YN, Thv said I led my BB baby." Both parents gasped, their expressions shifting to one of shock and disbelief. "Yumi, what? Nonsense, who said that?" Her voice was filled with anger and concern. "YN, everyone, everyone. MOM, everyone." Her voice cracked as she cried. Yumi quickly wrapped her arms around Yen, pulling her into a comforting embrace. Yen buried her face in her mother's shoulder, giving in to the support and warmth. Subin, his fists clenched in frustration, watched his daughters suffering with a heavy heart. Seeing her in such distress, he reached out, placing a gentle hand on her head. His own eyes were filled with tears as he looked on. Yen slowly broke the hug, wiping her tears with shaky hands. Yen, Mom. Dad. She looked at them both, one by one. Subin, yes, Princess. Yumi cupped Yen's face in her hands, her eyes glistening with tears of her own. Yen, you trust me, right? Yumi, hey, silly. Is that even a question? Yen, Dad. I didn't do it. I didn't. It was my baby. How could they say that? Her voice was filled with despair. Subin's tears fell freely as he listened to his daughter's anguished plea. Yumi continued to hold Yen close, her own tears blending with those of her daughter. Subin, relax, okay. Everything is going to be all right. As Yen's strength began to falter, Yumi gently helped her back onto the bed. Yumi, Subin. She said, her voice full of worry as she looked at her husband. Subin sprang up from his chair, his face a mask of urgent worry. His heart pounded as he raced towards the door, intent on calling for the doctor. But his steps faltered when he heard Yen's fragmented and distressing words cut through the heavy silence. Yen. Shh. She did it, she is lying and now. Shh. She gave me it to eat. Shh. She kklld my baby. Shh. She is. Before she could finish, Yen's voice trailed off into an agonized whisper, and she collapsed, her body going limp as she fainted. The suddenness of her collapse was like a physical blow, leaving Yumi and Subin frozen in shock. Yumi's face went ashen, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. She rushed back to Yen's side, her hands trembling as she checked for a pulse, her breaths coming in quick, shallow bursts. Subin, his mind reeling from Yen's frantic accusations, felt a jolt of cold dread. The urgency of the situation hit him like a wave. He swallowed hard, trying to compose himself amidst the chaos. With his heart still racing, he forced himself to focus, knowing that every second counted. He steadied his breathing, his hands shaking as he took one last, agonized glance at his unconscious daughter and the distraught Yumi. His eyes met hers for a brief, wordless exchange of fear and resolve. Then, without another moment's hesitation, he turned and bolted from the room, his footsteps echoing down the corridor as he sprinted towards the nurse's station. Subin, help. We need a doctor right now. My daughter, she's unconscious and, his voice was urgent, a mix of panic and desperation. The nurses, startled by his frantic appearance, immediately jumped into action. Their professional efficiency took over as they grabbed medical equipment and followed him back to the room. Meanwhile, Yumi remained by Yen's side, her face streaked with tears as she whispered soothing words, though they seemed to offer little comfort. She cradled Yen's head in her lap, her hands gently brushing the hair away from her daughter's pale face, her eyes darting anxiously towards the door, waiting for help to arrive. The room was filled with a palpable tension, the air thick with the combined weight of fear and helplessness. Every ticking second seemed to stretch into eternity as they awaited the arrival of the medical team, each moment a reminder of the gravity of Yen's condition and the urgency of their situation.